This is another in our series of interviews with attorneys, both local and in the case of our guest today, Jeremy Burnette, he is based in Atlanta, but at the same time, he is also a University of Pikeville graduate, or actually back then it was Pikeville College. This series is being hosted by the University of Pikeville through a grant with the Kentucky Bar Foundation. So I'd like to thank the Bar Foundation for giving us this opportunity to talk with some local attorneys about how they got there and what they do. And I am Nancy Cade. I am a professor of political science at the University of Pikeville. So thank you, Jeremy, for joining us. It's been a long time since I've had the opportunity to sit and chat with you. You were a student of mine a few years ago.
Some time ago.
Before we go any further, we always have to mention, Jeremy and I always remind each other of the fact that he had the highest collective points in my American government and politics class. And it's a record that still stands. So he's still good with that. So let me ask you, you followed a very different career path. You didn't go directly from your undergraduate into law school. But let's back up a little bit. When did you decide that you wanted to pursue a career in law?
Well, I actually decided at a fairly young age, despite my detour into psychology, I was always just keenly aware that there was a rule book, if that makes sense, that there were rules that governed life. And I learned early on that people paid lawyers to find out what the rules were. And I wanted to be on the inside of what the rules are. I wanted to know. I mean, intellectual curiosity, if nothing else. I felt like being a lawyer would bring to me an understanding of the rules that we live by, both in our personal lives and in business. So that was my attraction originally. And I will say I had some experiences that diverted my attention to psychology. I had a strong interest in mental health issues and suicide prevention and depression. And so at University of Pikeville College at the time, I studied psychology, and then we had a double major in human services, which is was counseling skills as well as sociology and psychology, of course. I know now there's an MSW or a social work program.
Yes.
We didn't have that yet then, but I felt very prepared for that from that experience to go to graduate school in psychology. So I went to Marshall University and for 2 years in their clinical psychology program. And I will say this, with that background from UPIKE, I was exactly where I needed to be for graduate work. I took testing and systems with Dr. Sohn, and then an assessment and evaluation as a graduate student. The first day of class, I knew everything they said. Everything they said.
I'm not surprised.
But everything they said was everything I knew. So the next class was new. So it was a great transition, right? So I would say that it was really empowering for me because there were only 14 of us in the program. To look around for people who've been in different schools and realize really that I had a top-notch education from folks with different backgrounds in psychology and also counseling. So anyhow, I did that, finished the master's, and then I took the licensure exam and passed. So I practiced for 4.5 years, and primarily only in West Virginia, primarily with abused kids and injured coal miners, which is a strange combination. But my stepfather, who raised me, he had a heart condition that visited him at age 49, and he couldn't work anymore when he had a heart attack. And so I was very empathic with the breadwinner feeling defeated and the depression. I'd never seen the man cry before. It was a very, humbling experience. And so I was able to use that experience to really be comforting and empowering and in counseling folks in the workers' comp system in the coal mining industry. But also, as a very young psychologist, I was 24, 25 starting out, and I small in stature. I looked young, so I worked really well with kids doing the play therapy. It was just a natural fit. And I had some training in that and got some more. And I got really good at working with kids in a non-judgmental way and for them to confide things in me. So I had social workers from around the state bring difficult cases to me to work with, which was very rewarding and very depressing at times, personally. Because being empathic, you're great at being a therapist, but you also feel a lot of it when it's over. But in that experience, I got to go to court a lot. I worked with attorneys in family court quite a bit. I was an expert witness in some civil cases and criminal cases, which was really fun for me, enjoyable for me. And so I got to see lawyers in action in different contexts, right? And and a couple of those folks really inspired me by their conviction for justice. And I just kept having this calling of like, what if I'd gone to law school? So when I turned 30, I decided I didn't want to turn 40 and wonder what if I'd gone to law school. I wanted to know. So I took the LSAT. I actually had to register late because it was an afterthought. And I took it once and got in, and here I am. But it was really it was a longer course for me to get there. But I've never regretted it because I know if I'd gone to law school first, I would not have ever gone back for a master's in psychology. That's an experience I didn't only got because I took that step first. So I've, my lifetime, I've had 2 careers I'm proud of. And I definitely think, that background was very helpful for me in law school and in the practice of law.
Where'd you end up going to law school?
Georgia State here in Atlanta.
What made you move from West Virginia? Marshall is Huntington, West Virginia, to move down to Georgia. What made you move?
Oh, that was purely more personal. The relationship I had at the time, his job moved him to Atlanta, and I was ready for a change. And when I stopped working in psychology and providing therapy and evaluations, when I was trying to figure out my next move, I realized that I probably needed to not do direct service because my heart was lighter, if you will. So I did work in child abuse prevention as a supervisor. So I've supervised and trained folks to go out and do parent training with families at risk. And so that was really rewarding work. And we did a lot of great work in a lot of families in the metro area. So yeah, that's what brought me to Atlanta. And then when I was here, as I told you, I had the revelation about wanting to know what if. And to choose a law school, that's an important point. I was going to stay in Atlanta, so I had only 3 options. And so in looking at those options, what I encourage folks to do is look at where do you think you want to be? Because if you want to practice in New York, there are law schools you probably should go to versus others. But I knew I was going to stay in Atlanta. Not that Georgia State doesn't have folks in New York. Just there are other schools, if you're going to get a beginning job at a New York firm, they interview on campus at other schools. So I knew I was going to stay in Atlanta. The return on the investment for Georgia State, the cost was markedly lower than some private schools in the city. And yet, when you do research, everybody should check out the bar passage rate for the law schools they look at. And when I looked at the bar passage rate for the Georgia bar, was actually the highest for Georgia State compared to the other law schools in the state for less money, and knowing I was going to stay here. And then you look at the median income, another thing people should look at when they consider law schools. What percentage of their first year graduates are employed, and what is their median income? Because if you're paying a lot for law school and median income is low, it's not a good investment. It's not the right place for you. So these are things I looked at, and it all just pointed to Georgia State. And also I had an interest in health law, being a provider. As a psychologist, I wanted to work with providers. And Georgia State it was in its more early beginnings, but had a renowned health law program. It's now more formalized, and it's the 2nd ranked health law program in the country.
One of the things that I often tell my students, since I'm the pre-law advisor at the school, is when they're looking at a law school, look at what you were talking about, look at the cost. In Kentucky, a few years ago, the last time I really looked at the statistics, if you could get a job at a law firm, if you could get a job practicing as an attorney in Kentucky, which is not always guaranteed when you come out of law school, the starting salary was around $35,000 a year. And if you're coming out of law school with $100,000 worth of debt,
right,
that can be a major consideration. So cost is important. That doesn't mean you want to go cheap, not necessarily, but you want to make sure that your investment is going to bring you the return that you want it. And at the same time, I also tell my students that, and this is a horrible example, don't immediately turn off the video, but not everybody's going to be a Kardashian. You know, he was an extremely successful, extremely wealthy attorney.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to be a Robert Kardashian. Most attorneys don't make that kind of money. And
No.
it's unfortunate, but it's the example that popped into my head as an example of someone who's who was incredibly wealthy. The other thing that you mentioned though was you wanted to practice in the Atlanta area, and I tell my students, think about where you want to live,
Oh yeah.
because that's the network you're going to build. You get to know the people that are in the class 2 years ahead of you and 2 years behind you. And that's automatically 5 classes of lawyers that you're going to be practicing with or against or both all the
That's
time.
excellent advice. Excellent advice, because all of you will be lawyers of one form or another. Some will be clerks, some will be, as you said, opposing counsel, some will be in a position to give you advice. So it is absolutely, I think it's just my nature, but it makes perfect sense when you start law school to realize that these relationships matter, that the way that you treat people in law school matters. People remember who the hotshot wannabes were, and who the courteous, kind, helpful people were. And that reputation follows you into the practice of law, actually, especially if you stay in the same community. Anyway, anytime somebody from Georgia State comes up on an employment or opposing counsel or something like that, I always get a call. Do you know this person? So people should never forget that their personal reputation has already begun, but it's certainly the legal part of it certainly begins day one of law school, and never stops.
And like I said, it's just so important to think about all of that when you're considering where you're going to go. Granted, for some people, their grades or their LSATs may be good enough to get them into Harvard. But is Harvard where you necessarily want to go if you are planning on practicing personal injury law in Lexington?
Right.
Is that necessarily the best investment?
And the debt consideration, most folks that I know don't pay out of pocket. So, because they're not Kardashians. So we have to usually take on some loans. And like you mentioned, I wasn't going to start my career in law at age 33 with 100 grand in loans. That just didn't make, sense. So there are considerations. I mean, of course, you want to stay as close to top tier as you can. But when you fall out of the top 100 or so law schools, you do start to see the prices go up, but the quality goes down, because some folks will pay whatever it takes sometimes just to be a lawyer, and they'll get there. But what happens is a lot of folks wind up getting a lot of debt and then don't wind up succeeding, and then they've just got debt. So it's picking a law school is a very hard choice. It's a very important choice. And it requires a lot of research and really thinking long term, like we talked about. Where do I want to be? Who do I want to be as a lawyer?
And one thing it just popped into my head. At the undergraduate level, it's very different than when you were an undergraduate. Today, people go for a year here and then a year there, and they bounce all over to different universities. You don't do that in law school. You don't go for a year to this law school and then transfer. Now, some people, can do that, but it's very rare, and it's not a good way to think about a professional school at all.
Right. That's true.
All right, one more question, education based, and that is, if you had to do your undergraduate career all over again, those 4 years, if you were back in my classes, oh, poor you.
Oh my gosh.
If you were back at an undergraduate school, University of Pikeville or anywhere else, are there classes that you wish you had taken or that maybe you would take again that could help you in law school or help you in your practice of law, or for that matter, help you in your life?
Absolutely. Any class that involves writing. So of course there's comp 1, comp 2. I did not take advanced comp, which I know we offered back then at Pikeville, but I wish I had. I took creative writing, which was also helpful. Uh, I wish I'd taken maybe some literature classes. I think literature is a way, so it would probably be a way to look at writing and analyze it from different perspectives, which is what we do a lot of in law school. So that's probably something that is something I would recommend is taking a literature analysis class. My psychology, upper level psychology courses were also very good because there was a lot of analysis and
Right.
picking theories apart. So that was also helpful. So anything involving writing, classes that require a paper, uh, I really recommend write, because you're going to write your entire practice. Very rarely am I in front of a tribunal. I'm very rarely in front of a judge. Uh, since this started with Zoom the past year, I've had 2 depositions and 2 hearings in which I've been Zoomed. Uh, but I write every day. There's always briefing going on, uh, demand letters, negotiation,
Mhm.
offer letters. This writing is so important. It's so crucial to what we do, and is only going to be more important, I think, going forward. And so anything involving writing, and then classes where you get to analyze, which I would say would be like literature and psychology, and ethics. I took Christian ethics at University of Pikeville College. It was at the time, and I know there are other ethics courses, and it doesn't have to be that one, but that was the beginning for me to delve really deeply into ethical issues. And as a psychologist, of course, I had classes in, excuse me, in ethics, and then in law school, we all have to take a class in professional responsibility where we learn about the model rules of conduct and the ethics that most, all the states have have adopted rules or have rules that govern the profession, practice of law. And you can't finish law school without taking that class and then also passing a separate exam, which is only geared towards ethics, professional responsibility. So ethics are very important. Then every year we have to take a continuing legal education unit on ethics. So the sooner and the more often that people can start really looking at ethical issues and going deep into those issues, like I could do in that class in undergrad, the better, because we don't practice in a vacuum, and we are constantly running up against novel questions, and especially in healthcare. And I tell clients all the time, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. Can and should are very different questions when you're counseling clients. So those are the things, writing, analysis, and ethics, that I would focus on in my electives if I were an undergrad again.
I think it's kind of interesting. I have a good friend who is a top litigator in the state of Indiana. And I asked him what advice he would, several years ago, I asked him what advice he would give to students. And this is the man that you are going to think about when you watch, Law and Order, or when you watch Perry Mason. He's the guy that goes into court all the time. And his emphasis was they need to know how to write. He said, I spend most of my life writing. And everybody thinks, oh, no, he just walks into court. No, he spends most of his life doing exactly what you were talking about, writing up briefs, writing up letters of whether agreement or any of these types of things. And it's so important. And students don't realize how much writing there is in law school and how much writing there is in the practice. All right, so let's move into your practice a little bit. You, you're not a criminal defense lawyer.
No,
You're not a prosecutor. What is it that you actually do in
that's a
your
great question.
everyday law practice?
Well, my chosen field of expertise is healthcare law, because I was a provider before. I wanted to work with providers, and my practice is about 40% compliance or counseling work, and those healthcare is very heavily regulated in America. It's probably the most heavily regulated industry. And so before clients can do much of anything, even buy a property or a piece of equipment, uh, they need advice. Can I do this under the certificate of need or whatever statutes may be involved? So a lot of it is just helping them navigate uh, the terrain, which it's pretty perilous. I mean, there's some things that make sense, but there are also things that you can do in other business that you can't do in healthcare.
So who would you said your clients with, I don't want you to name names, that's not what I mean, But what do you mean by your clients? Are they businesses or are they individuals or?
Sometimes it's individual physicians, but it's usually large physician practices in
Okay,
specialty groups like oncology or uh, mostly oncology or some of the other blood disorders. Um, and there's another big one I'm not thinking about this minute. Orthopedics. It's another
ah,
specialty group people think about. So those are the clients that generally encounter the problems that require my level of expertise. And the compliance/counseling part, I call that litigation prevention, because the goal is to do it right the first time, right? So you
mhm.
don't wind up having a lawsuit or the government coming after you to investigate. So I spend a lot of time with that. Uh, and sometimes I will consult with colleagues in the employment field because I'll have an employee issue. So I get to work with different attorneys. But it's or there could be a reimbursement issue where they're having problems with the payer. It's a wide range of of, uh, of things. So again, the counseling part is a huge chunk of it. It's probably at least half, maybe more, depending on the day. And then, but when things do go to a litigation direction, I am a healthcare litigator. Um, now, healthcare litigation is much more than medical malpractice. I don't actually do any of that. That's a specialty that I don't do. That requires more of a science bent than I've pursued. Um, but my litigation is anything as small as two doctors breaking up their practice, which we call doctor divorces, which they'll just fight to the end, all the way up to the government's investigating a large practice for potential Medicare fraud. And the reason why I have so much work to do is because the rules are so counterintuitive sometimes that folks can run afoul of them without realizing it. So to me, it always comes down to intent. Like, yes, this was built incorrectly, but was there intent to defraud the government, or was it a clerical error sometimes? Or we're just not understanding because Medicare, you're not always very clear. So that is a big part of it as well. So I work uh, with and against the Department of Justice sometimes, which is always interesting. Uh, I find they're generally very pleasant. It's just you are very aware of the fact that they make sure that they are the government, that they are the United States, and you were not. So there's that element to it. But I enjoy that work because it's very cerebral. It requires a very strict analysis. Because like it makes perfect sense if you have a business and somebody refers you more business that you throw them a kickback, right? People do that. They're like, oh, you sent me so many people to buy my products. Why don't I give you a present in exchange for that? But in healthcare, if you do that, then it's Medicare fraud, because anything that would influence the decision maker about healthcare that is beyond clinical judgment is not allowed. So we're not, the goal is to not have folks making decisions based on, oh, he'll give me a kickback if I send them to his X-ray clinic, so to take that out of it, kickbacks, other kinds of arrangements like that are expressly illegal in healthcare and can get folks in a great deal of trouble. There are folks that do it on purpose, and I don't represent those folks. There are people, because they usually have a criminal attorney, frankly. That's not really my thing. I do the civil litigation, the civil investigations, the civil side of it.
What do you know, this is directed both at our students and also at our community. And even though you don't necessarily always, represent individuals, if you were counseling someone, a friend, let's say, or an acquaintance, and they had a legal issue, what would you want them to know before they went to see an attorney? What do you want your clients, when they come to see you, to know?
Yeah, that's so important because it's the same thing. I mean, psychology and law do go in tandem, because when I was a psychologist, just like as a lawyer, I'm a professional secret keeper,
Yes.
right? And so when a client would come into my office, it was very important as a psychologist to say, unless you're going to hurt somebody or yourself, there's an exception. Everything you say is between us. I'm here to help you. I'm your advocate. The same with your lawyer. You need to tell your lawyer every day, because I can't help you if I don't know everything. And God help us all if we get halfway down the road into something and you didn't tell me something that pops up to be a problem that you knew about the whole time. It's going to be a problem we're going to have to overcome, and it's going to be difficult for everybody, uh, and not to mention more expensive. So I just recommend, the good, the bad, the ugly, just get it all out. Don't hold back. Your lawyer's heard it all before. You're not going to be judged, but he or she cannot do their best job as your advocate without all the information.
And that's not just in a lawsuit. That's not just in a criminal case. That's the truth with what we talked about before we started recording. We talked about the idea that you need to tell your attorney the truth on wills and trusts, on real estate, when you're selling a piece of property, anything, whatever it
Everything.
is.
Yes.
Because I think you touched on a very important issue. It can become very expensive. Very.
Yes. It's your money. So if you hold back to make yourself feel good or look good, it'll cost you later. So just tell me now.
And it can be very, very expensive to be on either side of a lawsuit. All right. You do something that we haven't touched on in this interview series. You do a certain amount of what's called pro bono work. And first of all, can you explain to everybody what we mean by pro bono work?
Yes. So there are two things that go hand in hand, but they are different, that folks considering a legal career need to really consider with their career beyond law school. One is pro bono work, and one is community service work. Now, community service work, that is being involved in causes that you care about, on board membership or something like that, which I can talk more about in a bit. But pro bono work is actually legal work that you would actually bill a client, except you're not billing a client, you're doing it pro bono because that person or entity does not have the means to pay for the services. And so both are important. One is legal work and one is community work. Both make a better lawyer. Now, pro bono work, you know, I had a mentor tell me early on that pro bono work is, there's a like an unwritten contract between the lawyer and the community. We Yes, we go to law school, we pass the bar, we do all the work to be a lawyer, and then the community allows us to practice law and make a good living doing it. So we should give back to the community for that privilege, a certain amount of our own time without charging the community. Uh, Most bars, I think, state bars have aspirational goals of 50 hours a year. That's a minimum, in my experience, of pro bono work that you should do in a year. And it doesn't have to be what you do. I do pro bono work where I see a need. I learned about wills and trust and estates beyond law school because I wanted to do pro bono work, writing wills for first responders, firefighters, police officers, as well as one of our clients has a breast cancer wing, and they had a lot of women who had gotten a late diagnosis and needed to pick who's going to raise their children and how that's going to look and how that's going to work. So I supplemented my own, what I do with another, it's not terribly difficult, but the things I needed to know, so I could go and do that. And that to me felt, it's intrinsically rewarding. It's also good for the community. We want our firefighters to have wills so that they don't have families in a mess when things end. Nobody benefits from there being uncertainty when somebody passes. And it gives such peace of mind to the patient or the firefighter that you're doing it for. So I've done that every year that I practiced. I've done work with excuse me, entities like there's a children's museum in Atlanta that was having a fight with their landlord, and it was existential. If they had lost, they would have no longer existed. Uh, and we had a bench trial, which we won. Pro bono usually doesn't go that far, but it
Yeah.
was a lot of hours. With that, there is a place for kids to go who are not privileged, who get experiences they wouldn't have otherwise because we had that case, and that was 10 years ago, and it still continues. So the pro bono work is very rewarding, uh, and if you practice in a community, you should want to give back to that community. And there aren't really, I mean, you can do discrete projects or long-term cases, but uh, it's really just to me, if everybody has their own path, it feels like a moral obligation. I've been given this opportunity to be a lawyer, which is it's my second chance career, so I'm loving every minute of it. Uh, and I feel indebted to the society and the community where I practice to give back to it. Um, so I just can't underemphasize that enough. There are so many different programs. I mean, I've worked with individuals at clinics where you go in and sit and wait for clients. You don't know what's coming in, but everybody at some point in their life seems like needs a lawyer or needs legal advice, and very rarely can somebody afford to pick up the phone and start paying somebody by the hour to ask a question. So to have those outlets, I will tell you this. I had a client who was overdue for a motorized wheelchair from Medicaid. She's disabled, obviously, and had been housebound. And so she told me, she's, well, I haven't been out of the house because my wheelchair doesn't work. I can't get the people at Medicaid to call me back. I know I'm supposed to get one. I called, said, this is so-and-so's lawyer. Here's her case number. Why doesn't she have a wheelchair? They said, well, escalate this to our legal department and get back with you. And 2 days later, she had a wheelchair. Now, she didn't have to have a lawyer, but my making that one phone call got the outcome. So sometimes it's the threat of litigation that gets people to move. But I've never been prouder of having a bar card. I wasn't sitting in front of a judge. I wasn't writing a winning brief, but that woman got immediate response and could leave her house because I made a phone call, which is, that speaks to maybe the way the world should not work. At the same time, when you have that kind of power where you can call somebody and get their attention, we should use it for good
It
whenever we
sort of
can.
goes to the idea, to whom much is given, much is expected. And you have been given through your own hard work, don't get me wrong, but you've been given the opportunity to be a lawyer. And now you are using that for the greater good. And I admire that tremendously. I'm very, you know, I get to, I'm going to interject a personal comment here. I get to visit with one of my alumni, and I get to talk with them a little bit about where their life has taken them. And I had shared a small part of their journey with them when they were an undergraduate student. And it makes me so proud to hear of this type of life experience that you've had. To some people, getting that woman a wheelchair may not be a big deal, but to that woman, it was everything. And I am so proud that that is something that you would take the time, even though that is not your, if you will, your area of your legal practice. You would take your time, and for that matter, your money, because you didn't earn any money while you were doing it. And
Time
so
is money, they told me.
that is something that I take pride that you do that. It makes me very, very, very proud. But anyway, you also mentioned being involved in the community. And I know, and I'm going to interject here because I think some of the things that you do, especially in LGBTQIA work, in diversity work, is so important. I've followed some of the things that you do, and I'm very impressed by it. And it's community service in a different way than pro bono work, though I know you've done some of that also. But talk a little bit about why you think community service is so important to a law career.
Absolutely. So my mentor, when I was a first year attorney, came to me at 6 o'clock my first day and said, where are you going after today? I said, well, I'll probably go home. And he said, well, a good lawyer doesn't always go home after work. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you need to find 2 or 3 things that mean something to you, whether it's an alumni group or a social cause or a political group, and commit to it. And he said, it will make you a better lawyer to be connected to the community. So you may get referrals out of it, you may get money out of it, that may also happen. He said, but the most important thing is that you don't just go straight home. Yes, you've got people you want to see and dogs you want to walk and all that. He said, but you've got to invest in the community again in which you practice. And so I took that to heart, and the first thing I did with that was the Stonewall Bar Association, which is the GLBTQ. I don't know if they use I or at this point, uh, but it's the Bar Association for the state of Georgia for sexual minorities and those who support equality. And that was just a tremendous opportunity because I rose to president of the statewide organization in my fourth year of practice, and we did some continuing education things around transgender issues, people who needed name changes, but also the way that transgender people are treated in the courts, especially family court. When someone raises the fact that the step parent is transgender, it raises issues that it should not raise. So training people on sensitivities and getting people together, linking people with attorneys who would help them. Uh, my year as president, I had a great time reaching out to the trans community because I feel like at the time, at least, it had been because there weren't a lot of transgender attorneys in our bar. It was it was a group of our culture that had been ignored a little bit, and I wanted to make the T capital an LGBTQIA. So and we had a lot of things going on here in Atlanta. We had a landmark employment case against the state of Georgia that went in favor of the person who was fired for being transgender. So we were able to celebrate that at our annual dinner. So that, everything is what you make of it. I had that chance to join the board. I wound up getting elected president. I had a whole year to formulate programs and advocacy. And the focus that I did on transgender rights is something I'm very proud of. And that's a group I stay involved with. I just was co-chair of their dinner last time. It was our 30th anniversary, and we celebrated a lot of, frankly, victories that we didn't think possible when I started this in employment as well as marriage equality. So that is a large part of it. Also, Land Illegal is the nationwide group that does pro bono legal work, impact litigation. What I mean by that, folks that don't maybe know, impact litigation is a case that's going to have a major impact on everyone else, like the marriage equality case. Those were individuals who had brought suit, but the impact is that it made marriage equality the law of the land. So with Land Illegal, they do impact litigation, but also small scale, this person's getting discriminated against because of HIV status or whatever. So I pick up smaller cases as well as I do research for them on their larger cases. Land Illegal whenever I get a chance. And also I've been active a bit with HRC on the political side as well.
So you carry your legal career, you carry your legal identity, you are a lawyer. You carry that with you into your service work, into your pro bono work, and it helps you, I would think it would help you have an appreciation for the law, for that matter, and what the law can do for the good, what the law also can do for the not good. But I think that it's inspiring to hear that you don't just sit and be a lawyer and make money.
No, that would be boring.
That's so many of our students think that they're going to become wealthy as a lawyer, and they may. If you get into a good practice, if you get in and if you work hard, you can do well financially as an attorney. But I like your story. I like what you're saying about turning that around and helping those who need your skills and your talents.
Yeah. So the next thing I did, thank you, was I spent 6 years on the board of Georgians for a Healthy Future. And you're talking about how laws can go both ways. There are a lot of laws that were not very consumer friendly for healthcare consumers. So we have a lobbyist, and I'm very proud of the work we did to promote healthcare equality, equity in the state of Georgia. We got some good laws passed through our lobbying, actually. One, a surprise billing. And then I rotated off that board because they don't keep you forever. So I've now just been asked over the weekend, actually asked to join the board of GAIN, which is Georgia's Asylum and Immigration Network. Asylum and Immigration Network.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they do pro bono cases in the courts for asylum seekers, and that has been, I've done work with them because I had a colleague on their board, and it's a group I feel really strongly about. It's never been more needed than now. You know, as I will say that it's been in the news that there have been some reunifications of families, children separated at the border. What has not been talked about enough in the news is those lawyers are not paid attorneys. They're pro bono attorneys who are doing that. You have to read the story to see that it's not in the headline. But that's, to me, the important part is, you know, this is not somebody in the Department of Justice's job. These are pro bono attorneys who come in and said, let me fix this. And those are the sorts of things that inspire me to also to do pro bono work myself, because they're making a real change and they're taking their time. You know, let me do my part over here.
And I think I'd like to, you know, you have a certain level of success and you're able to devote more time to pro bono work than someone who is starting out. But I think that people who are starting out, as you were with your mentor, you need to start considering becoming a part of your community. You need to start consider doing pro bono work. If you'll allow me, it's good for the soul. It's good for who you are, and it may someday help you, you know, in one of your cases. But if it doesn't, it's still good for your soul.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wins.
And
I mean, unless you don't win the case, at least they had advocacy. You know, they didn't have to pay for it. I mean, I feel like it benefits the lawyer as well as the recipient of the help.
and it can give you some experience that you might not have gotten otherwise.
My first trial was that pro bono trial.
There you go. If, you know, as we wrap up, I was wondering if there's anything else that you'd like to share with prospective lawyers, budding lawyers, or even for that matter, community members that you wish people knew about the legal profession, what you do, any of that.
Well, you know, I mean, it's tempting to say that, you know, enough of the lawyer jokes, right? But
you're not the first one I've interviewed that has mentioned that.
you know, it's cute for a minute, but having done this for 15 years, I mean, you'd be surprised, 16, whatever, how many people at a cocktail party, oh, you're a lawyer, I hate lawyers. Like, I just met you. How is that not rude in your mind? So there is a negative connotation that persists. And I know there are lawyers out there that bring us that reputation, honestly. But the vast majority, this is what I wish people knew, the vast majority of lawyers in my practice, in my experience, are really good people. Some are just trying to make a living, sure, but, and not there's anything wrong with that, but a lot of the good work that you see that happens, like the reunification of families, that there's often a pro bono lawyer involved in that. So if you think, you know, even about, you know, how many hours a year pro bono services are provided. So I wish that we got more credit as a profession for the good that we do. Now, as far as students, I will say, being a law student, I have never thrived more than in those 3 years. I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I needed to do. And what I saw from folks that came straight through, because I had that gap where I worked for a bit, was they viewed law school as, let me check off this box and have this class and take this test, and then I can be a lawyer finally, you know, can leave me alone. But that, to me, was so misguided, because I savored every day of law school. I mean, I was just glad to be there, you know, to be around that such, you know, you are in academia, you get to do this all the time. But I knew then I would never be around so many brilliant people in one concentrated place at once. And you know, a lot of us were returning students. You learn with and from people, from their experiences. It was just the best experience. So what I advise folks who want to go to law school is, great, do it, take your time and enjoy it, and never forget that You're in a privileged spot. There are people that would love to be there, and you should just get the most out of it that you possibly can, and not think of it as I gotta get through these 3 years and then I'll be done. But I get to spend 3 years doing something to learn how to be a good lawyer, and hopefully doing something you love. Because if you don't love the work in law school, you may not love being a lawyer. So I want students to even every class, undergrad, whatever, not don't view school as an obstacle to overcome to get to do what you want. It is becoming who you are as that professional every class and every day. And I just want folks to enjoy it and not view it as something just to get through.
That's just wonderful advice, and I thank you for sharing it with it. Like to thank you, Jeremy, for joining us. Jeremy Burnette, who is based in Atlanta, practicing law, but is a proud Pikeville College graduate. We now are UPIKE, but we're going to let you be Pikeville College. And I'd like to thank the Kentucky Bar Foundation for the grant and for allowing us to visit with our students, our former students, and to share their knowledge and their expertise with our students and with the community. So I thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.